I just want to ask you a few questions, a series of questions, and you may or may not answer them depending on whether you want to give an opinion on these things. Do you think there is any possibility that the Israelites throughout their history had any big relations with a place like Mecca, for example, as we know it today? Did you ever know of such a thing or hear of such a thing?
Nothing is coming to mind, and Mecca's pretty far south. Yeah, not that I know of, but I haven't looked into trade relations or anything like that. If that level of relationship would be relevant, the two major highways, the Way of the Sea and the King's Highway, run through Israel. So I mean, if you're doing anything down to the south, or if you're doing anything up to the north into Anatolia or Mesopotamia or further east, chances are it's going to come through Palestine. So it wouldn't surprise me if there are trade relationships, but I don't know of any mention in the biblical text. That's none that stand out to me. That probably didn't help at all, but
It absolutely did, actually, because, I mean, even the lack of knowledge of such a thing points more toward the idea that, there's probably not really much to it. One other question that I have is the assertion that Abraham might have gone down to Mecca to build a temple there. I mean, as far as I see it, we have the accounts of the story of Abraham, because it is so fundamental and so significant to the Hebrew Bible. We have them all very much laid out, and there are maps made about these things. Is it conceivable to you that he would have gone down there to Mecca to build a very significant temple?
There's certainly nothing in the text of the Hebrew Bible that would lead me to believe that would have happened. Genesis is pretty clear in the stories that it tells about where he was and what he was doing, coming from Ur of the Chaldees. Just to be clear, not that I would say that's necessarily historically accurate, because I don't think that it is, but, the way that the narrative portrays it, he's coming from the east, coming into Canaan, wandering through Canaan's, building tents, and altars and all these things. He goes down south a couple of times, but then comes back up. The Abrahamic cycle, I think, is relatively clear, and I don't see anything in there that would lead me to believe that he exited Canaan to any great distance.
The narrative would be Abraham under the authority, the command of Allah or God, went down there to Mecca to build the first house dedicated to God there in Mecca. It seems implausible to me that such a highly important thing would have no mention at all in biblical scripture. And it would also seem implausible to me that after doing that, he would just again go up there to the regions now known as Israel and to just pursue the rest of his life there.
Yeah, I mean, I trying to play devil's advocate. I mean, is there some thought? Maybe I don't see any evidence of this, but does the argument go on that this would have been revisionistic history, that it actually would have been in the original, stories, and that this was either taken out or re-edited so that is that the idea?
Depends on who we're talking to, but the general assertion is made, and then there are certain different methods to explain this discrepancy between the Islamic accounts and the Jewish or the Hebrew accounts of this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be fair in my thoughts here. That doesn't seem plausible to me. Because I think we know a fair amount about the editorial history of the Hebrew Bible, particularly the Pentateuch, particularly that section of the Pentateuch. And there's nothing that I can think of that would lead me to believe that editorial history would have resulted in taking out something that monumental that was there. I would imagine that the writers would have spun it, perhaps, in a way that would have been beneficial. Deleting it completely, that seems difficult. That seems implausible. I don't see any reason to suspect that that's the case.
Yeah, and I don't want to put too much on you here. I know I'm just trying to get out information from you.
Sure,
yeah. You know so far. One final question is, you don't have to answer it as said. As a scholar, a student, a scholar, an expert on various fields that deal with biblical history, with the Near East, have you heard of the Kaaba as a place of significance in the larger ancient history of these regions and the mythologies and traditions and religions? Is this something that, in your understanding and in your entire scholarship, is something that is of significance?
Nothing comes to mind as far as the textual data is concerned. From an archaeological standpoint, I still don't know of anything. I have some background, fair amount of background in archaeological, matters archaeological. Nothing that I know of in my investigations would, off the top of my head here, would suggest that area being of importance to individual worshipers or those that are in Palestine worshiping. Nothing that I know of, or of it being a place of importance just in the broader ancient Near East. Nothing that I know of.
Mm-hmm. This is already very enlightening. You might not see it as such, but getting these responses confirms what I very much know and very much expect. The lack of information, the lack of knowledge about these things very much confirms the idea that there is probably not much significance to the whole thing.